If you believe one decision can't echo for a lifetime, stay with me. Because what this father signed in a quiet hospital room followed him for years, and what he discovered afterward changed the way he understood love, guilt, and forgiveness forever. And before we go any further, if stories that make you feel something real matter to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. You never know who might need to hear this message today, maybe even you. Mark Ellison never imagined that his worst enemy would be a pen. He was 42, a construction supervisor with rough hands and a soft heart. The kind of man who fixed neighbors' fences for free and always ordered the cheapest thing on the menu so his wife could have dessert. Clara had always been the light in their home. She laughed loudly, sang off-key while cooking, and never let a single anniversary pass without writing Mark a handwritten letter. And then came the diagnosis. Stage 4 glioblastoma. The doctor had spoken gently, but the word terminal landed like a hammer. For 18 months, Mark fought like a man trying to hold back the ocean. Double shifts. Overnight delivery jobs. Selling tools he once cherished. Borrowing from retirement funds. Smiling for their daughter Emma even when his chest felt hollow. Clara endured surgeries, radiation, experimental drugs that left her nauseous and trembling. But even in her weakest moments, she would whisper, "We're still here." That counts. But hospital bills don't care about love. They piled up in thick envelopes, red-stamped and urgent. Insurance covered most. But most was not enough. One evening, the hospital administrator sat across from Mark in a small gray office. "You need to understand," she said carefully, "continued aggressive intervention may not change the outcome. And financially, you're approaching a critical limit." Critical limit. Mark felt as if someone had put a price tag on hope. The next day, the attending physician brought up something he never thought he'd hear. "We should discuss a do not resuscitate order." Mark stared at the wall behind the doctor's head. "If her heart stops," the doctor explained, "CPR and resuscitation could cause trauma without meaningful recovery. It may only prolong suffering." Prolong suffering. Later that night, alone in the cafeteria, Mark did something he'd never done before. He calculated Clara's life in numbers. If she coded and was revived, ICU costs could skyrocket. Ventilator support. Extended life care. Debt that could bury Emma for years. He imagined foreclosure notices. Collection calls. His daughter growing up resenting him for leaving nothing behind but bills. He told himself this was mercy. He told himself Clara wouldn't want to be kept alive by machines. He told himself 1,000 things to silence the one truth he couldn't face: he was exhausted and afraid. The next morning, hands shaking, he signed the DNR. He kissed Clara's forehead afterward. "I'm protecting us," he whispered. He never told Emma. And Clara, drifting in sedation, never knew the paper had been signed. 72 hours later, everything shattered. It was 2:14 a.m. Mark had stepped into the hallway to take a call from a contractor threatening to replace him. He was mid-sentence when alarms erupted. Code blue. He dropped the phone. Nurses rushed past him. Doctors flooded the room. Emma, who had been asleep curled up in a chair, woke to the chaos and ran barefoot down the hall. Mark reached the doorway just as Clara's heart monitor descended into a flat, merciless line. The doctor glanced at the chart. There it was. DNR. A pause. A breath. Hands that might have pushed harder, didn't. Time of death, 2:19 a.m. 5 minutes. 5 irreversible minutes. Emma's scream cut through the corridor. Why did they stop? Do something. Mark's body collapsed against the wall. He couldn't say it. He couldn't tell his daughter that the reason they stopped was him. Grief is not loud at first. It is quiet. It sits beside you at the kitchen table. It sleeps in your bed. It stares at you from your wife's empty closet. The funeral passed in a blur of white flowers and hollow condolences. Emma didn't cry. She simply held his hand and stared at the casket like she was waiting for someone to correct a mistake. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived. Mark almost didn't open it. But he did. It wasn't another bill. It was an approval notice for a retroactive financial relief program Clara had qualified for during her final treatments. Nearly 80% of their remaining balance would be forgiven. Mark read the sentence again and again. If he had waited. If he had asked one more question. If he had held on 72 more hours. The debt he feared destroying Emma's future would have disappeared. He slid down the kitchen cabinets and wept in a way he hadn't allowed himself to before. Not quiet tears. Not controlled sorrow. This was devastation. Emma found him there. "Daddy?" He tried to hide the letter, but she picked it up. She read enough to understand. "You think it's your fault," she said softly. He looked at her, eyes swollen. "I signed something," he confessed. "I thought I was saving us. I thought I was protecting you." Emma sat beside him. For a long time, neither spoke. Then she said something he never expected. "Mom talked to me." Mark's breath caught. She said if she got too tired, she didn't want machines hurting her. She said sometimes people stay because they're scared to let go. He felt the room tilt. "She knew you'd blame yourself," Emma continued. "She said you love too hard." That night, for the first time, Mark considered something radical. Maybe Clara's death wasn't the result of one signature. Maybe it was the natural end of a battle she had already fought with everything she had. Guilt doesn't leave quickly. It lingers. But slowly, Mark began therapy. He attended grief groups. He talked about the DNR out loud, even when it made him shake. He learned something most people never talk about: end-of-life decisions are not about money alone. They are about fear, fatigue, hope, love, survival. There are no perfect choices when someone you love is dying. Only human ones. Years passed. Emma grew. The sadness in her eyes softened into wisdom beyond her age. On the 5th anniversary of Clara's passing, they stood by her grave. Emma placed a small chocolate cupcake on the grass. "She'd laugh at us for being dramatic," she said. Mark smiled faintly. "I used to think I failed her," he admitted. "I thought those 5 minutes defined me." Emma looked up at him. "They don't." "What does?" he asked. "How you loved her for 18 months. How you never stopped trying. How you stayed." The wind moved gently through the cemetery trees. Mark closed his eyes and let himself feel something new. Not regret. Not shame. Acceptance. He couldn't rewrite those 72 hours. He couldn't undo the signature. But he could choose how to live with it. He began volunteering at hospitals, speaking to families facing impossible decisions. He never told them what to choose. He simply said, "Make sure your choice comes from love. Not panic. Not fear. Love." Because he had learned something the hard way. Money can be earned again. Houses can be rebuilt. But time, once gone, does not negotiate. And yet, even regret can transform into purpose. Even guilt can become compassion. Even a collapsing world can be rebuilt, brick by brick, with honesty and grace. On a quiet evening years later, Mark sat on the porch watching Emma leave for college. She turned back, ran to him, and hugged him tightly. "You did your best," she whispered. And for the first time since that night in the hospital, he believed it. So if you're carrying guilt, if you're replaying a decision you can't undo, hear this. You made the best choice you could with the strength and knowledge you had at the time. That matters. Love is not measured by outcomes. It is measured by intention. And sometimes, forgiveness begins when we stop punishing ourselves for being human. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who might be fighting silent battles. Because stories like this remind us that behind every decision is a beating heart trying its best. And sometimes, even after the world collapses, love is what rebuilds it. Broken heart.